Hi students, in this lesson we're going to cover the grid, 3 keys to success, looking at proportion, alignment, and spacing, how to block in your structure to create a successful wireframe, looking at type, specifically using Google Fonts for your design, reviewing the typographic contrasts, and how to create a typographic system. We'll create that typographic system using Adobe Illustrator with paragraph styles, and we'll have a final discussion talking about adding real content to your wireframe design. Okay, so the first step we need to do is download the grid.ai file from Canvas and open that up. Once you have it open, you'll see that there are 3 artboards set up at 1280. Each one will have, if you open your layers or under window, go to layers and make sure that palette is open. Each one will have a grid, design, and type layer to work with, and we're going to go through the process of laying out each one. Under the grid, it's pretty simple. It's a 12-column grid. Each column is set at 8 pixels wide, and then each gutter or margin between each one is set at 4 pixels. 12-column grid is the standard for working with responsive web. And as we get further along in the semester, I'll go over how your layout will transform into a mobile version. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we have 2 things open. One is to have our rulers up, so Command R will bring up the rulers in case we want to set any guides as we're doing our design. And the second thing is under View, we want to make sure that we show the grid, and again that's Command quote will bring that up. And if we zoom in really close and actually shut off the grid, it's a little easier to see. You can see every single pixel within our grid to work with. And the other thing we want to do is make sure we snap the pixel, and this will give us a really finite control of how we're aligning everything on our grid. So now we're all set up and ready to start to block in our design. Okay, so you have your 3 homepage sketches, and now you're ready to create a digital version in Illustrator. Let's talk about the 3 keys to your success. Number 1, proportion. Just like we talked about when you were sketching your initial ideas, the correct proportions for your blocks of content is key to developing a hierarchy for your design. 2, alignment. Making sure all of your blocks of content align appropriately. If things get out of line, your design will naturally take a turn for the worse. And spacing. The space around the content is just as important as the design of the content. Making sure that you have enough space between your content is crucial to a good design. Okay, now we're ready to block in our navigation, a hero image, a feature article, and a sub-feature article. So just going to select the rectangle tool and designate the area for my navigation. I'm going to use the grid, and if you don't have the grid on, just come and turn it on here and lock it so you're not selecting it. And in the design layer, I'm designating my navigation. And I'm going to do it about 10 high. Each one of these, again, is blocked at 8. So that's the proportion I'm looking for the navigation. Then I'm going to draw a block for my hero image. I'm going to do a full bleed at 1280. I'm going to set this to a lighter gray, which I recommend for everyone, just so our design doesn't get too heavy with the use of black. I'm going to butt that image right up against our navigation, our text will probably float in this space, so that will naturally create a padding and spacing between the type and the image. And then the height I'd like to work with is going to come all the way down to the first padding, vertical padding there, and I'm going to just set it at 526 so that it's a even number. I need to define my feature article now. What I'm going to be looking closely at is the spacing. So the spacing between my hero image and my feature article image. I'm going to designate a space between each article of 4 pixels and on the left of 8. And then I have an overall image of 658 by 324. Now I need to block in my subarticles. I'm going to look at the same spacing between the feature article and the subarticle of 8 like we have on the left here. And then for 2 more subarticles, I'm going to break that space up into 2. This height should be around 242. It's about half of what this is, including, again, some padding. I'll duplicate that same by holding Option and Shift and copy it down. So this has a padding of 8 on the left, a padding of 8 between these, but the spacing in a subcategory of sub-feature articles has a 4 and also has 4 here as well. So what I'd like to do is start to introduce some design elements. Because I have an 8 here, I'd actually like to break the space up between the feature article and the sub-articles by adding a line element. So I'm going to say that line element should be a stroke of maybe 3. Make sure it's just the gray so it doesn't dominate in our design, initial wireframe designs. And my overall wireframe starts to look something like this. I just went and quickly blocked in the rest of the design for my thrifting website. If you have any issues with the actual canvas document setup not being tall enough, just select the arrow tool, hit document setup, hit edit artboard, and this will allow you to crop or add more height to your document. You don't have to work with the width, just the height. So now I have everything blocked in. I am ready to add some typography to my design. Let's talk about typography. For this project, we're going to use Google Fonts. You can go to that at fonts.google.com. There's 2 reasons why we use Google Fonts. 1, it's free, and you don't have to deal with any licensing and ownership of a typeface and how you use that typeface through different media. And 2, Google Fonts is set up to work with apps and websites. It'll give you a snippet of code that you can plug in. You don't have to host the typeface and again worry about licensing. So for our project, when you first come to fonts.google.com, you'll have all these options for categories on the right. We really want to work with just serif and sans serif typefaces, so we're going to shut off display, handwriting, and monospace. And then once you find one that you think you really like or is a possibility for your project, just going to hit the plus. I like Roberto or Roboto. It has 12 different styles, which is what I'm really looking for in a typeface, along with it being well designed. So I'm just going to hit the plus to select this font. I'm going to get rid of any old, and then I have Roboto up, and I just hit the download, and I can download it and put it in a fonts folder for my project. And if you need any assistance with uploading and turning on a typeface with FontBook, just let your faculty member know, or you can Google it. It's pretty easy to figure out. The 4 typographic contrasts, and they're really the key to creating a good typographic hierarchy for your design. And these are pretty basic, and they seem very obvious, but they're pretty challenging to put into practice consistently over and over again. So the first contrast is just simply size, creating variation within your design using size. The second is weight. Third is using either uppercase or lowercase. And last but not least, using a typeface like Universe and mixing it with maybe something like Bodoni. So being able to switch and mix typefaces. In our project, we'll be working with size, weight, and case, and independent on your faculty input, we may mix face in with that. It's just depending on each one of your designs. So let's put these 4 contrasts into practice, and let's start to work on our design. Okay, so let's set up our typographic system for our website. What I mean by that is we're going to define what the navigation style is, also any feature articles, sub-feature articles, footer navigation, and so on. So we want to use what's called a paragraph style, which allows us to edit multiple pages through a single edit, which is very, very useful, and I'll show you how to do that. So we'll want to make sure you have the layers palette open. You want to lock your design layer, and you want to work on doing your type layout on the type layer. And the second palette we want to have open is under Window, Type, and Paragraph Styles. Let's work on our first typographic style, which is going to be our navigation. Hit T for the type tool and type in our title. So the first one is Discover. I'll add about 4 spaces, then Stores, Search, and Login. And I like to set it all in one line just because it's easier to apply a style and make edits to versus typing each and every one being separate. Easy way to get the right spacing is just use spaces versus a tab. Sometimes the tabs don't recognize the pixels correctly. Select that space in between, copy, select the space, paste, select the space, paste. I know that's a hack, but that's probably the easiest way to get it to work. And now we have the spacing we want for our initial layout for our navigation. The character style is defaults at Myriad Pro. Please don't lay out anything on your website in Myriad Pro. That's the default. To apply a paragraph style to your navigation, you can either double click and select the type or direct select the type with the arrow tool. Hit the create a new style. You double click on that. Title it navigation. If you double click again, it will open up your paragraph style options. And this is all the formatting options you can have for type. Today we're really just going to focus on basic character formats. We'll go over character color and indents and spacing at another time. So under Basic character format, you want to select your Google font. Mine was Roboto. I'm just going to select regular for this navigation, and I'm going to make it 16 point. I'm not going to do any kerning, and I'd like to make it all caps. And I'm going to track it out about 10 points. So the tracking in review is the spacing of the entire word. The kerning is the spacing between each and every letter, so that edit the space just there versus the entire word. And leading is the overall height of a paragraph, the spacing in between each line. And I'm going to hit OK. So now I have my navigation set. I just want to quickly show you why we create paragraph styles. Just give me one moment. So if I'm laying out 8 to 12 pages, web pages, or even app pages, and my navigation is consistently across the top, and I have to make just a really simple edit. Say Jeff and I come around and we talk to you and we say, well, that navigation, it's just a couple pixels just too small. What you would have to do is, if you set it by hand and not with paragraph style, go through and edit each one's size. So again, this is fine if we have 3 pages, but imagine if you're doing a really huge project. Let's say you have 50 some pages you have to lay out. Or if you're doing a book, it's the same scenario. You would have to go through and make a change on every single page, which honestly can take hours. If you use a paragraph style, you can see that each one of these is connected to that paragraph style. So again, it should always highlight when you select it. That means that the style is applied appropriately. So now if I want to change it, I don't even have to have the type selected. And let's say that we want to bump it up 2 points. Now obviously, if it's close to the edge, you're going to have to move it anyway. But you could always then try to push the tracking down to see if you could pull it in without having to change every page. So let's say I set it back at 0. So it's a quick way to edit multiple pages. So again, if I set this back to 16 and 10, it allows us to edit every single page. Now I need to lay out the typographic system for my feature article. Then that space is designated right here, and this would be the image that complements that type. Just going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to look to align it off of this box here. Just going to hit T. If I don't have the actual title for the feature or the text, I can just type in what I'm trying to name it. So this one's feature article, and I can put the real text in later. So the set a style, it's the same process again. I'm going to hit the create a new style. I'm going to type in H1 in web design and app design. You use H for header, and 1 meaning it's the most prominent header on the page. And you do H1 through H, however many you need, H10. And you just have to recall what those apply to. So same process. I'm going to come in, select my font family to Roboto again. This time I'd like to use the bold. I think I'd use about 60. 60 is a little big. Let's go with 48 for the feature article. No case this time, no tracking, no leading. and I'm just going to hit OK. And make sure that it aligns. And sometimes you have to shut off the snap the grid to get it to snap the pixel, and then put it back. So it's a little fussy sometimes, but you just got to work with it. So I'm just going to align that. Here, and then I'd like to have a category, more or less like a tag for that type of article. So again, I'm just going to hit T. I don't know what that category is yet, so I'm just going to type category and I'll come up with that later. It sometimes naturally defaults to the typographic style that you've created, so this time I'm just going to hit plus. Oops, wrong one. Hit add a new style, double click that, and I'm going to call this category, and double click it. It's naturally defaulting to the previous setting. This time I'm going to set it back to regular. I'm going to set it at 14 point. I'm going to use case of all caps again, and this time I'm going to track it out 100. So what I'm starting to do is set up a typographic system that has the feature title, the subcategory name that might be searched within. I'm going to provide what is called a deck, which is like a Twitter length summary of the article, and then a read more button. So turn my grid back on, turn my pixels back on. This time I'm going to do a little bit different. When I'm just trying to set a header or one line of text, I usually just hit the type tool and let it start typing. If I'm working with paragraph type, I want to select the type tool, and a little bit differently, I want to draw the actual type box. And the nice thing about this is it's going to default and put the type, put some lorem ipsum type in for you. And again, you can just set this exactly the way you want it to look, and then you can apply the real text later. So again, if I bring my styles back up, I'm going to make a new style for this. This style is going to be called my deck. In the deck, I'm going to double click, go to paragraph style options. This time, I do not want to have all caps as an option, especially if I'm trying to read a paragraph of text. If it's set at all caps, it is really hard to read. So again, in your paragraph text, type 101, please do not make it all caps. It's really challenging to read. Secondly, we want to take the tracking and put it at 0. If the letters are tracked too far out, it makes it hard to actually read the words. So there's 2 type 101 lessons for you right here. 1, don't make your paragraph text all caps, and 2, don't track the letters out because it's hard to read. So once we fix that, we can look at also changing the leading. So if I change it to 18, it makes the height a little bit taller. General rule of thumb is if I set it at 12, I usually set it at 16, and so on. I increase it by 4s, and it tends to give you a pretty good start for laying out a nice paragraph. The other rule of thumb with laying out your type in paragraph form is don't make super long, wide columns for your type. This makes it really hard to read, and honestly, it just looks really clunky. So again, try to keep the type that you're setting between 4 and 5 columns wide. If it's 4, it's good for a smaller deck. If it's 5, that's probably perfect for actual article title copy. And the last thing we're going to lay out is the Read More button. So I'm just going to hit the type tool again. This time I don't want to select the type box, so I'll push that up a little bit further to clean it up. Hit the type button, type in Read More. Now I may actually make a box around this, but for right now I'm just going to focus on the alignment and the spacing of this. Make a style for it, hit Read More, double click. I'm going to make this one bold. Again, maybe all caps, maybe 16, and that looks pretty good. So now, if I shut off my layers and turn off my grid, I have a nice typographic system with a header, a category listing, again, like a tag, a way to search about that article, the deck, and a Read More button. If you wanted to add more to this, you could put a date the article was written and a author. So I just want to touch on the layout of the feature article. Go back to the 4 typographic contrasts and just talk about what was used. Obviously, size plays a big factor in creating a good typographic system. For the header here, we use size and weight using a bold. We use size and case here for the category. The case creates a contrast between the header and the actual category title. The body text is set as simply and as legibly as possible with good leading, and also just looking at consistent spacing. So again, 2 rows here, 2 rows here, and 1 in between the actual title and the text. We want to continue to recognize that system and apply it throughout our design. So to continue on, I'm going to hit the type tool and start to set my sub-article text. So it's the same process. I'm going to create a new style. Since this is another header, I'm going to call it H2. Double click it. Go under basic character formats. Type in Roboto again. I'm going to work with the same bold. This time I'm going to set it at 24 point. And no applied styles like leading, tracking, or kerning, or case. Gonna hit OK. Now you can create a new category header here, or you can just simply copy and paste that into place. Then I'm gonna lay out my type for my deck. Something like this. Again, it will default to the last one we set it at, so it's H2. Because we've already set a style for the deck, we just want to keep it consistent, so we can hit deck, and it will set that type. If it cuts it off, just simply copy and paste it. And now we have a sub-article text set. If you want it to be a little more top-heavy, obviously you can work with the grid, and if you want it to center and so on, those are kind of design decisions you can make, and it's based on each and everybody's project. So again, just setting a basic system that has the category, sub-article text, and the deck for it. I can take that same text and hit Option and Shift and copy and paste that down into the next box, because this will be another category and sub-article text. So even if you don't have the content that you need right now to put together a completed wireframe with content, you can dummy it in just to get the overall typographic system set, and you can come back in and skin that in later. So I jumped ahead and completed laying out my typographic system for my wireframe. So I have my navigation in place, where I might want to put my logo. I created a rough draft for the thrifting search feature, the main feature, the article feature, sub-article features, a popular article, which is highlighted by the taller graphic. This I created a H3 header for. If I don't have the current inventory for different types of thrift stores, I just wrote that I need a rough description, and I may find that later, along with more articles, a map that deals with finding different thrift shops in the area and its ranking of those thrift shops is why they're showing up, a newsletter sign up, and the overall footer, and then all my sub links that I need for the overall project. So everything is in place. Now the big challenge is to go in and actually find the correct information for your feature articles or your trading or your forums or whatever that you're building. So just want to show you an example of content for a feature article. Then I collected it all in a Word doc and I'm just going to plug it in. So my feature article is Crazy for Cats, and it's an outfit for the day. So the category is going to be daily inspiration, so I'm just cutting and pasting it. And Crazy for Cats, outfit of the day, cut and paste. And here is my text for Crazy for Cats. So I'm going to have to obviously make some adjustments to my style, but simply moving it down, you can see that I actually have a real article plugged in for my design. So that's the end goal for this week, is to draft your content in like we saw here and slowly but surely plug away at putting in that content. Our lesson has now come to an end. We covered the grid, 3 keys to success, focusing on proportion, alignment, and spacing, blocking in your wireframe structure, looking at type, specifically focusing on Google Fonts, the 4 typographic contrasts, and creating a typographic system using paragraph styles. And last but not least, adding real content to your wireframe designs. I wish you all the best of luck and happy designing.